Welcome back, folks, to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content that I watch on the WWE Network. For the past number of episodes, we've been talking about Legends House right here on the show. Today, we're talking Season 1, Episode 8 of Legends House, back in Piper's Pit, a very heavy episode here today. First and foremost, my apologies for not getting the episode up sooner. I was busy over the weekend, so it is a bit delayed. I will get the episodes back up and running today. Hopefully, today to catch back up on schedule episodes. Reviews of episodes 8 and 9 today, and then the final episode, episode 10, going up this weekend to finish off the season of WWE Network and Chill for the month of November, and then we'll be back up and running, hopefully, at the onset of 2017. More on that later. But anyway, we kick off back in Piper's Pit this episode of A Legends House with Roddy Piper coming back from an autograph signing in Atlanta, and nobody is happier than his roommate Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who I talked about in episode 7 in my review of that episode, and that Hacksaw was like a lovesick puppy, and that he really missed Piper, and he was all lonely without him, all that other kind of stuff. So he's elated that Piper's back. Piper, when he gets back, him and Hacksaw are kind of bonding and discussing lost time and stuff like that. And Piper shows that his hair is only starting to grow back now, is a lot sooner than pretty much anyone else from Las Vegas, so he's not too happy about that. After they got manscaped before the Chippendale show in Las Vegas. So Ashley comes in, she announces that their latest activity as a group will be a roast for Roddy Piper. So essentially all the legends would get together, put together their own set of jokes with the help of some writers named Guy Torrey, who was the host, Dan Abbout, and Ben Glebe. They'd all help each other out writing material against each other, about each other, in one glorified roast. So Hillbilly Jim, before anything even gets started, before they even get started with the material, he says Roddy Piper is to sensitivity as Captain Hook is to masturbation, which is pretty funny. Just considering the fact that Roddy Piper has heard it all, he's taken so many digs throughout his career, which is essentially what Hillbilly Jim meant, and that Piper has taken so many shots verbally over the course of his career that nothing really phases him at this point in time, or so he thinks. But anyway, everyone works on their material. They're all going hard at work. And the writers emphasize that they can't be afraid of offending anybody. That's just the way that roasts work. It's about making fun of other people, not like repping them down or tearing them down or just being a flat-out asshole. But it's about being mean in a funny way. But Atlas, he starts laughing at his own jokes, but it's hard for him because he said that he grew up as a nice guy. His mom told him to never make fun of anyone else. It was a lot harder for him than it was for pretty much anyone else in the house, except for Fink. Fink's jokes were way too nice. He didn't want to offend anybody. He came up with the most PC jokes you could possibly ever hear. I thought they were okay. I'll talk about his execution of the jokes a little bit later on. But even the writers said that he's a very nice guy, but nice does not work in a roast. So anyway, so Jimmy Hart's jokes are way too insider, just really not all that funny at all. Not even like wrestling jokes, just jokes that only he would get, just something way beyond, way over the head of the average viewer. So his jokes early on just are really not that good. Hillbilly Jim, his jokes are full of energy. He's excited, as the comedy writers say, so they're happy to be working with him. We get the Iron Sheik showing up at the actual roast. He shows up as a surprise appearance, but you can't understand a damn word he says because his accent is so thick. You can't understand anything he says, but he's still a funny motherfucker anyway. He's great. So anyway, Mean Gene says Tony was so poor, and they're also, in addition to making fun of Piper as a typical roast would work, in addition to making fun of Piper, they're also making fun of each other. So Mean Gene says that Tony was so poor that if he wasn't a boy, he would have nothing else to play with, which was pretty funny. So I'll run down a few of the jokes that were said here. Pat Patterson said, if I had your face, Roddy, I'd get it circumcised, which was pretty funny. Jimmy Hart's jokes just completely fell flat. They were the same jokes that he was going through before. I figured he would pull something out of his ass, but he couldn't. Just his jokes were not funny. No one thought they were funny. He was just dying to death up there on the stage. So anyway, Fink's jokes, again, were a lot like Jimmy's in that they were way too nice or just not funny or whatever. But at least he was self-aware. He was self-aware, and he's like, oh, can I get a meter for like how you guys are gauging my jokes or whatever? How you guys are responding to my shtick, to my lines. And he's like, oh, fuck this at the end. It was really funny. So at least Fink, although his material was not great, it was very cookie cutter. And he tried. At least he was self-aware and made the most of it, and he was happy by the end of it. So you could see the smile on his face by the time he sat back down in his chair. So anyway, Tony Atlas, who at the start did not want to make fun of Piper at all, just because he was raised a wholesome boy and he doesn't like to make fun of anybody, blah, blah, blah. He ends up exceeding all expectations. He comes up with some pretty good stuff. Pat Patterson says he's very happy for Tony because he comes up with some great material. And then it's time for Piper, who I think did the best of anybody. The worst was easily Jimmy Hart. A little bit of Fink, but at least Fink kind of made up for it a bit. Roddy Piper was hands down, from what we heard anyway from him, was hands down the best one out of anybody of the legends that was making jokes. Piper says that some of these things will stay with us for life, or in Gene's case, only 2 weeks, which was pretty funny. He also said Hacksaw will bring wood to the ring with him, and it's the only wood he's had in 10 years, which was also great. And they're best friends, too, and he's really no holds barred. He's holding nothing back in this thing, so, which again, really should not surprise anybody. Piper is one of the greatest talkers of all time. He's genuinely fun. He's a great guy, so the fact that he knocked it out of the park is really no surprise. So hands down, Piper, the guy who was getting roasted, had the best jokes of anybody in this roast, so I give the award to him. Mean Gene said, I thought the roast was absolutely incredible. He loved it. He had a few good one-liners, too, so Mean Gene was just killing it. Piper, when they get back to the house to eat dinner, before dinner, he says he was really happy that the guys did not go below the belt. There was a lot of stuff they could have brought up from his dark childhood and his dark times and stuff like that, but they didn't go there. They kept it safe. They did some funny stuff. They weren't completely PC like the Fink, but they did do some funny material without going too far, and Piper was very happy with that. So even after that, we get some dinner time with the legends. Pat Patterson said that he feels like they're closer than they were a week ago. And then all hell breaks loose. Chaos ensues amongst the legends. The first time in a few episodes we've really had any sort of dissension between the legends on the show. They were really starting to get together, really starting to get along throughout the last couple of episodes, but all hell broke loose here. They weren't shouting at each other or anything else. But Pat Patterson just starts going off, basically out of nowhere. I don't know if there was a disconnect there. They didn't show the segue from one part of the conversation to another, but Pat Patterson just starts going off that he says everyone feels like they're walking on eggshells. Tony feels like he's walking on eggshells. Pat Patterson said that he feels like he's stuck in wrestling. Some people just can't escape their characters. He feels like it's wrestling all the time with him, and he never gets to be himself. And then Roddy Piper just goes off on the Fink when Howard Finkel says, or when he's asked, do you feel like you walk on eggshells? And he didn't give an answer straight out, so Piper got mad. He brought up the whole king seat thing in the limo from their ride to Las Vegas many episodes earlier. Fink is very cordial about it. He says, I understand, sir. I apologize. It was an honest mistake. So Fink was really cool about it, but Piper can kind of go off sometimes. He kind of hugs him afterwards. They're fine. They make up pretty quickly. But Pat Patterson just starts crying. Everyone else gets emotional, too. He just says, I don't want to be a phony anymore. I understand they'll never main event WrestleMania. Really just kind of going off and saying a lot of random things. I know he was probably intoxicated, which was what kind of triggered this conversation, this topic to begin with. But he says, I'm just not who you think I am, or I am not allowed to be who I truly am, and I'll just leave it there right now. There's something I've been holding in for a while, for a long time, and I'll just leave it there. And we find out what that thing is in the next episode. Anyone that has been, unless you've been living under a rock, then you know what the secret is of Pat Patterson, which I'll talk about in episode 9. But this was a big, I don't want to say coming out party. That was episode 9, but in the subsequent episode. But this really was a big moment for Patterson, for Pat Patterson. We'll find out more about that in the next episode. And then we get to close out the episode with some heavier stuff, which I thought was impossible coming off the Pat Patterson, stuff. But we get to breakfast the next morning with Tony Atlas and Jimmy Hart. And Jimmy Hart really isn't saying anything, and Tony Atlas is like, why aren't you hungry? And then Jimmy Hart just kind of lets it out there that his daughter had passed away, I believe, in a car accident. I don't think he said what it was. I believe it was a car accident. He got a call from his son or someone that that his daughter had passed away, and he just loses it. Tony's there to console him, and Jimmy Hart says that was his first child, his first daughter, and his only daughter. He has a son that was over in Iraq. He thankfully came back, but really, really heavy moment, dude. I mean, you talk about Jimmy Hart on this show, and he kind of comes off as annoying. He's way too overbearing sometimes, or a lot of the times, but he's got a lot of shit going on, too. Even the most annoying people have some of the deepest shit going on, and no one knew about this up until now. So it was a real emotional moment. Tony's there to console him, which is great, but really, easily, undoubtedly, obviously, the heaviest 5 minutes in Legends House history up to this point. So, man, just a real heart-wrenching ending to this episode as we close out Season 1, Episode 8 of Season 1, but Season 1 is quickly coming to an end. Episode 9, which we'll talk about in the subsequent episode of WWE Network and Chill, is more or less the season finale. Episode 10, which I also will be reviewing over the weekend, hopefully, is a lot like that episode of Total Divas, which I talked about a few months ago, where they all sit down talking about the season in retrospect a couple years later. In the Total Divas case, it was like a couple months later. And in the Legends House case, it was like 2 years later, because they filmed the show in 2012, and then they filmed that season finale with all them sitting down talking about the season like 2 years later when it initially aired on the WWE Network in 2014. So anyway, guys, as you could probably tell, the next episode of WWE Network and Chill, which hopefully should be up sooner rather than later, we'll be covering Season 1, Episode 8 of Legends House, as seen only on the WWE Network. So until next time, guys, you can find me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant, find me on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews, and right here on YouTube by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. So as always, guys, be well, stay safe, have a great week, and I'll catch you guys down the road.